So when Rick and I first met each other, we were working in the same company, and I don't know if you guys have ever had this experience, but you're in a work environment and you look at somebody as, somebody who's, corporate or whatever, they're, you know them only in that work environment. And then Rick and I, at one moment in the middle of a meeting, started talking about music, and suddenly I realized as I pulled the thread that there was a lot of shared interest. And the one that really I thought, oh, I like this guy, is when you told me that you were a Stranglers fan.
Well, glad you pulled the thread and I didn't unravel completely, but yeah, definitely one of my favorite bands.
Yeah. We had that mutual interest in a lot of the punk and the post-punk stuff, and certainly the Stranglers was one that we both shared in a big way. What are some other ones? I mean, I think there's so many, but Dylan is another one that I think that we both...
Dylan, I think The Dead.
The Dead,
yeah.
That's right. Now, did you see the Grateful Dead?
Actually, no. I actually own a lot of Dead. It just worked out timing-wise. I was going to originally see them in 1970, I think. They did a Festival Express tour in Canada, which was a big deal.
Yeah.
And I ended up having to work or something. I think I had to work the evening the show was happening. They did play in Toronto.
The free one or the paid one?
Well, yeah. I was kind of glad I didn't go at that point, right? The gates got crashed and all the rest of it. But yeah, I think there's a lot of stuff that we've had a lot over, like Elvis Costello as well.
Yeah.
And, I think that's been a lot of fun over the years, actually. Right?
You went to the Wake Up Canada tour, I think you said, at the O'Keefe Centre, was it? Was that the first show you saw of him? Was it with Battered Wives?
Battered Wives.
Yeah,
exactly.
Because I remember that was being, there was demonstrations about that, and Battered Wives were kicked off the ticket after the Toronto show.
Interesting, they were surprisingly good for all the hype that was happening.
Yeah.
They were actually quite tight, a little contrived maybe as a punk band, so to speak, but yeah, it was a fun show. And actually, I think the Armed Forces record was a record that the majority of the material that was played, but fantastic with the attractions. It's just an incredible band. It was really, really impressive to see them play live. Elvis vocals were great.
I always say that my moment, like everybody talks about their Beatles moment, and I was either a little bit too old or a little bit slow on what was on TV and Ed Sullivan, but my moment was turning on Saturday Night Live, knowing that the Sex Pistols were going to perform, and it was Elvis Costello, and Pete Thomas, the drummer, had "Thanks Malk" on the T-shirt because the Sex Pistols pulled out, and of course that was the famous one where he played Radio Radio after being told that he couldn't do it.
Yeah, so interesting little fact there, right, is that Radio Radio, this year's model, which is one of the best records that he did, in my opinion, more because it's raw, it's a little... great rock and roll record in my opinion, but what's interesting is that the version that was released in Canada did not have Radio Radio on the record. So, and was not even on I think it may not even have been on the US version as well, right? So it was interesting, and I remember seeing that show as well, and I love the fact that he stopped and said, we're not going to do this.
We're not doing that one anymore.
We're not doing this anymore. And then broke right into another number. I just thought that was great and had a lot of balls for him to be able to do that, right?
Absolutely. So, did you ever read Unfaithful Music and Disappearing Ink, the Elvis Costello memoir?
I have not.
So I was talking to a friend about this, and there are so many music memoirs, and there are ones that I absolutely love. And among my top three would be Dylan's Chronicles, Robbie Robertson. You and I were at the reading of Robbie Robertson, right, when he was about Testament. And I would put Elvis Costello's Unfaithful Music and Disappearing Ink as one of the top. And it kind of jumps around the way Bob Dylan's does. It's sort of like a Tarantino read. It's sort of the time is not chronological.
Not particularly linear.
No, not linear at all. But he's so knowledgeable and passionate. And I think Elvis, to me, is one of those guys. There's a great Vanity Fair thing where he does his top 500 records. And it's fantastic because he gets into big band, he gets into jazz vocals, country. I mean, that guy, he was at some Grateful Dead shows in the 70s, just a few years from becoming the angry pigeon-toed horn-rimmed glasses.
Right. Well, what's interesting is that, I'm sure you know this as well, is Dylan did some radio shows at one point. Yeah. Which are all available.
The Dylan Radio Hour, yeah.
And the Dylan Radio Hour is great. If you've never checked it out, just as a fan, it's very interesting to kind of see his fingerprints on different things that he features in the show. Yeah, very interesting band. And Costello, I think, has had a great career, right? I think his real fans have kind of stuck it through. I think another one of these artists who kept evolving, and that's difficult for fans, I think, sometimes to be able to, continue along the journey. Many artists, many fans tend to like a certain group of records from an artist, but I think, it's like that Neil Young expression, right? The journey into the ditch is always more interesting than riding on the highway.
Absolutely.
Right? So,
I mean, I've been a Costello fan. The first time I saw him was the one before that tour. I saw the one that we talked about earlier, the Welcome, or what was it called? Welcome Canada tour. I've got the poster from that tour as well. But I followed him all. I was living in Japan. I saw him with the Brodsky Quartet. I saw him with the Furious Five.
You played with the Heatwave.
And I saw him at Heatwave as well.
Right?
Yeah. I mean, that's the famous concert, the show with the Talking Heads, which I didn't realize wasn't the second, but the first time the Talking Heads played with that lineup. They played Central Park was the second. I read Chris France's book.
Yeah.
It's actually pretty good too. He's not a big fan of David Byrne.
Yeah, those guys don't get on well.
But I find, and it's funny because right now King of America has been, they've got like a 6 CD box set that I just bought. And I'm just starting to dive in it. And of course, King of America, he's playing with some of Elvis Presley's TCV band, right? James Burton and I don't remember all the names of the band members, but there's this great Royal Albert Hall performance with some of those members of the band that played on that record, like T-Bone Burnett and everybody. And it is a very good live performance. 86, I think.
Yeah, fantastic artist.
Yeah, he's somebody I just love following all the time. Well, to be continued, Rick, and we look forward. I look forward to continue this on a personal level, and hopefully we'll do more of this on Fitz's Electric.
I'm really glad you brought the Stranglers up.
the ties that bind. There we go. I like the rat song. The Ratus Norvegicus.
Ratus Norvegicus. That's right.
Carpe diem, motherfuckers.